the collective work as we go forward. And at the next session, we're going to start thinking about what action teams and structures would be needed in order to accomplish the work. So if we go to the next slide, please. So everyone should have received summary notes of our session last time. And if you didn't receive those, you can send a direct message to me or to another member of the Kellen team. And so we wanted to give you a recap so that we can all get grounded in our work together today. So first of all, there are many definitions for the word resilience. And we talked about our working definition as a group, and that is the ability to thrive despite adversity. And there were a lot of head nods as we were talking about this concept the last time. Resilience is like a muscle. It can be built over time and with use. And like muscles, it can also atrophy if we're not attentive to it. We also talked about the different types of resilience. So 4 different types: the individual level resilience, which is often what we think about in the work that many of us do. Family level resilience, so the strengths and the assets and how families deal with and resolve challenges. Organizational resilience, so what does it mean as organizations experience adversity and how they react and respond to that and become proactive about that as well. And community level resilience. And our focus as a group, as the Resilient Guilford Network and Trauma Provider Network, is about building community level resilience. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So we have a framing question here, or a problem to solve on this slide. And it's just the way that we're thinking about this question at this point in time. And we'll delve into this later today. So how can we grow resilience in our community and across systems to make Guilford County a safe, secure, and nurturing place for all? And that's not a small task. There's a lot that goes into this. Which you all identified when we broke out into small groups the last time we were together. So we're going to go into that a little bit. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So there were several themes that came up. First, there was strong agreement about the need for building community resilience to improve outcomes across Guilford County. And when we're talking about outcomes, we're talking about lives. So I want to make sure that we're putting the human aspect to this. We're talking about building better systems and structures so that all are served well. There was a desire for a working definition of community resilience. So what does that really mean? And we're going to delve into that in just a couple of minutes and do an exercise that helps us put a stake in the ground around community resilience in Guilford County. And with that, also the need for shared language and shared measures for this effort to be successful. So what are we talking about? How are we talking about it? And then how are we measuring as we go along? So for example, and this is something that came up in the groups, even the word advocacy can have lots of different meanings based on our roles in organizations and within the community. And so we really need to get on the same page about what we're talking about when we're talking about terms like trauma-informed care, when we're talking about toxic stress, when we're talking about ACEs. So that'll be a part of this process as well. If we could flip to the next slide, we're going to just talk a little bit about what you shared back with us. There was brilliant discussion about what it will take to build a resilient Guilford County. And I wanted to just lift up a few things. I also want to signal at this point that this part might be really helpful in the breakout groups that you'll be in a little bit later today. We're going to be talking about values, and some of these about what it will take to build a resilient Guilford County reflect some of those values. So this might be a place where you can think about what you might want to lift up later on in the breakout sessions. So trust came up over and over again in the groups, and the fact that trust is built when we're in relationship and in proximity with one another. And so that was incredibly important. A commitment to the common good. We heard that across all groups, is that we have to set aside some of our differences and the ways that we work now in order to aim for something better for the whole. A common understanding of what we're aiming to achieve, that goes back to some of the measurements, and also just a general idea about what resiliency means. A laser focus on equity. This came up and it was framed as a non-negotiable. Like, how do we lift up equity in everything that we do? Because a better community relies on that as a central focus. Shared power was also brought up in a few different ways by lifting up grassroots leaders who've been doing work in community for a long time. And then also by ensuring that individuals and groups who've been traditionally sidelined in power structures are central to design and to decision-making. We also talked about a mindset shift from fixing deficiencies to celebrating strengths. And our guest speaker, Carrie Sipp, is going to really hit upon that a little bit later today. She's talking about PACE's connection and some of the reframing that we have done as a state and as a country. And then also, this was huge among the groups, a shared understanding of available resources in a changing environment. We are shifting and changing all of the time. And one of you brilliant folks said, Guilford County is resource rich, but those resources never seem to get to the people who want them and who would benefit from them. And that is a really important thing to keep in mind as we move forward. If we could shift to the next slide, please. We also talked about navigation to resources, which was a big theme that came up in all of the groups, and making sure people get the right resources at the right times and resources that they want and need, not ones that we think that they should have. A stronger community alignment piece is really important so that we can, as a community, collectively anticipate community needs, pivot and realign as conditions change. We have all experienced this over the past 18 months, right? And so how can we ensure that when in times of great disruption, we are able to bounce back and move forward together collectively? And so that was another thing that just kept coming up over and over again. A common understanding about trauma and how to prevent trauma and how to heal trauma. And again, this goes back to, it was really centered in the pandemic and to the injustices that we've seen as a community, as a state, as a nation, and how do we heal as we move forward and prevent trauma in the future. And then the ability to identify and disrupt generational trauma. That was lifted up in 3 of the groups as needing to know how to do this, to understand and to see cycles, and then know how to handle that and disrupt. And then finally, an investment in infrastructure and systems. Everyone recognized this. This includes monetary funding, as well as the time to rethink the fragmented system that we have today. One of the participants said that, and this really stuck with me, is that a lot of what we experience and continue to do is a patchwork of best intentions. And that is just a really a layering on of things instead of taking a step back and figuring out what's going to work next from a systemic perspective. So just want to lift that up. And if you were the person who said that, give yourself a pat on the back or lift that up in the chat. And then I just want to say thank you for all of the great work and the energy that you brought to this last week. We're going to have time together in breakout sessions again to really explore values. But first, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, who's going to walk us through a decision-making process around working definitions for community resilience.
All right, well, thank you for that, that update on what we covered last month. And that kind of gets us into this next piece of, we spent a good bit of time in the last session talking about what we mean, what participants, what community members mean when we say community resilience. When we use those that term, community resilience, what is it that we're really trying to get at? And as we talked in the last meeting, if you can advance the slide, Leland, as we talked in the last meeting, there were some key elements that that are known across the country, with resilience being one of those key elements. So you see the box that says strengthening resilience and protective factors. Really thinking about not only addressing the, to the comment that Mary shared, the patchworking of issues that might be in play or that we need to address to help support families, but what are we doing to build the positives? So not just address the negatives, but how are we building the positives intentionally within communities? And so as we talked about that last month, we asked in the breakout groups about how people see the word resilience. What do they hear when they say that? What kinds of ways would they describe this word? Really focusing on community level resilience. So with that being a recognizer that at community resilience, we're identifying that these are community and system level issues that need to shift and change. And so from all of the feedback that was provided in the last meeting, we drilled down to 4 potential ways, themes that kind of came out as potential definitions for how we as a collective group want to talk about community resilience. And so those options are presented on the screen for you now. And I'll give you a chance to kind of read through those. Leland, if you can advance the slide, please. All right, so we've got some that are short, some that are long, but so we'll read through those, and then we plan to do a live poll to kind of get some feedback on which one resonates with you the most. This won't be like the final decision if there's a close tie or if more discussion is needed, but we do want to get continue to think about how we as a community talk about community resilience. So the first option is the dynamic process at the community and systems level in which communities respond and adapt to stresses and challenges. Key attributes include a community response that promotes safe, secure, and nurturing environments for all, and draws on interconnected social networks and coordinated, easy to access, and comprehensive resources that help communities thrive. So that's option 1. Option 2 is the same definition, but drops off the key attributes and just really focuses on a shorter, more succinct definition of community resilience. Option 3 describes community resilience as a process whereby people overcome stress, trauma, and other life challenges by drawing from social networks and cultural resources embedded in communities. And option 4 is the ability of a community to use its assets to strengthen systems and to improve the community's physical, behavioral, and social health to withstand, adapt to, and recover from adversity. So these are the definitions that kind of rose to the top based on the discussions of the participants from the last call. And we're going to share a poll now so that you can anonymously vote on which option you think most represents how you feel about the concept of community resilience and how you think it should be defined as our working definition for our group. Knowing that as I launch this poll, Leland, can you launch it from there? There'll be a key at the bottom that says poll. As we launch the poll, the length of the answer in the poll had a maximum number of keys, so I wasn't able to indicate it. In option 1, it kind of cuts off a key attribute, so the entire definition for option 1 is not fully listed there, but it will give you the option as much as possible. So, Leland, are you able to launch that poll?
I am not. I'm going to make you the host so that you can, because it would not allow me to do that.
Okay.
Sorry, folks, for that.
And as we're getting that poll launched, I invite you to share in the chat box some reactions, thoughts, ideas that you have as you're reflecting on these definitions. And what we may do too is have you think about these definitions and then enrich the conversation with Carrie's conversation on values, and then we'll come back at the end for kind of a feedback vote if that works for folks. So let's do that as we're figuring out what the issue is with our poll here. All right, so hold that thought on the vote. We're going to come back to that, and we'll circle back to that towards the end as we get your feedback. So as we move forward in these in this particular presentation and conversation, The definition as we define community resilience will be important, and equally important is how we develop values around that. And I am beyond thrilled to invite as our guest speaker, Carrie Sipp, who is the Southeastern Regional Community Facilitator for PACES Connection. And I'm imagining that many of you on the call have heard of PACES Connection, and she'll tell you all about it. But Carrie is a science, brain health, and parenting enthusiast who was born in a well-hidden addiction, violence, neglect, and abuse environment. She vowed that if she ever had children, they would have a saner, calmer childhood than her own. After having 2 children and going through a divorce, Carrie joined a recovery group for family and friends of alcoholics, immersed herself in parenting education, quit drinking just in case, and continued to help her family thrive. She says she somehow realized about 25 years ago that children's brains were wired for peace and calm, not for agitation or addiction. Her intuitive belief to seek peace made more sense to Carrie as she continued on in her career, and she began to focus more on ACEs and got linked in with PACES and PACES Connection. Today, Carrie's work has come full circle with her work with PACES Connection, formerly ACEs Connection, as she'll discuss, leveraging her ongoing recovery and 4 decades experience as a writer, marketer, fundraiser. She nurtures community-based PACES organizations in 11 Southeastern states and supports their grassroots efforts to prevent and heal trauma. So please join me in welcoming Carrie Sipp as she talks about and shares her expertise and knowledge about how communities across the Southeast United States have developed value statements as part of their coalitions.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Now let me ask you, I'm sorry I didn't ask you this before, but are you going to advance the slides or should I have them up myself? Or?
Yep, I'm happy to advance them.
Oh, that's perfect. That's great. Well, thank you. And actually, I want to go back and say that I realized that children's brains were either wired for peace and calm or chaos and agitation. And so we, as leaders of our communities, have a choice as to whether or not what we're doing is wiring kids' brains for peace and calm, or is wiring a kid's brain for agitation and chaos. And so that they're not naturally wired for peace and calm, I don't think, but I think that there may be some epigenetic factors in there that some kids are just naturally wired for more attention seeking or more, what would we say? Anyway, they're just wired for more input, and some are just wired for peace and calm. So how is our community supporting wiring children's brains to seek peace? That was our big family motto, was breathe deep, seek peace. So you can advance the slide, Kelly, thank you. So we're going to talk about the importance of values in building a resilience initiative. And you can advance the slide. So my the woman who created PACES Connection put it this way, that are we about blame, shame, and punishment, or are we about shifting our communities to understanding, nurturing, and healing? So truly it's making understanding, nurturing, and healing values in what we do, I think, because moving from blame, shame, and punishments gets us out of looking at what's wrong and truly into what y'all were talking about earlier, is being a community focused on the positives, on your strengths, being strengths-based. You can advance. So we know that PACES science changes what people believe about themselves. And this is another something that you can fuse into values or not. It just is just something to keep in the back of your mind, because values get back in there and they bubble around, and they're what inspire us to put words to what we're doing. And so a whole lot of different factors roll into this, but the things that the big truths that we want people to realize about PACES science, about being born into adversity, is we're not born bad. And we're not responsible for the things that happened to us when we were children. You know, little kids always take it on and think it's their fault. We coped appropriately given what we were offered, and that we didn't have other ways to cope. What we did as children that kept us alive can keep us sick as adults. If as children we lied to save ourselves, as adults, lying is not going to get us anywhere. And the great news is that we can change. And that's the beauty of this work, because as we change our communities, we change ourselves. As we change ourselves, we change our communities. And it's just so beautiful to see. Next slide. Oh, let's see. I can't control it, but somebody.
Leland, can you hit next slide, please?
Oops, there's one slide before that, I think. And so this is when I was saying about the communities, that as we change ourselves, we change our communities. And so knowing the power of community can change what communities believe about themselves too. I'm looking at my time here. Cross-sector work works. Y'all are doing cross-sector work. I looked at the names and where you're from in your chat. It's beautiful. Diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I know that it's key and critical to y'all, as it is for all of North Carolina. What gets measured gets done. And at a future meeting, we'll talk a little bit more about measurement. There's an app that PACES Connection created called Growing Resilient Communities 2.0 that helps communities do this. And Kelly is familiar with this, and we just keep steeping our communities in this, that what we're doing is we're educating, we're aggregating so we know who's learned about this and who needs to learn about it. We're engaging people. That's this meeting. You guys are masters of engagement. We're activating people. Y'all are going to be looking at what committees you want to be on, where you want to take this work, what your value statements are. Those are activating processes, because those are the keys to growing resilient communities. Educate, aggregate, engage, activate. And then the final one that I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think we in the South get really uptight about celebrating. It's almost like, whoa, don't you get too proud, girl, you know, but we must celebrate this work at every turn. Celebration needs to be something that is just part of it, like breathing in and breathing out. Celebrate that, because truly the science tells us, as we look into more and more about PACES science, and that stands for positive and adverse childhood experiences, that we've got to be giving children positive experiences. It's not enough just to keep the negative away from them or to help them heal from the adverse. Children's brains, to develop properly, need the positive experiences, some joy, in addition to the safety, stability, and nurture. Next slide. And so just a little bit about PACES Connection, Leland, without being overly prideful and celebratory, is that if you can do the next slide, Leland. Next slide.
Leland, you there?
Uh-oh, am I putting people to sleep? I'm so sorry. That's not
No, I'm advancing the slides. Are you all not seeing them?
Okay, I just wasn't seeing it. There's one just before this, but about PACES Connection, just so y'all know, you're invited to join PACES Connection. If you can go back one slide, we are the digital home for all things PACES science. And we support communities to accelerate the use of PACES science to solve our most intractable problems: child abuse, poverty, racism, And again, positive and adverse childhood experiences. Next slide. And this really thrills me. And I'm going to ask you, Kelly, to tell me, I think I've got about 7 minutes left, is that the next slide, we've got 53,000 members and growing, and I will invite each of you to join your Guilford County, or Kelly can, your Guilford County PACES Connection website. You can advance the slide. We're a community of communities. There are 428 communities worldwide that are like your Guilford County initiative that are focusing on these problems. And I'm going to tell you that the coolest thing to me as the Southeastern regional person and as a person who lives in North Carolina, I'm over in Topsail Beach, a tenth of those communities are in North Carolina, y'all. No, that's not true. Almost. We have about 30 communities. So I guess it's probably like 7.5% of those communities are in North Carolina. North Carolina has more communities than any other state other than California. There is great work being done here. It just excites me to no great end. And because these slides have the links on each slide, you can go take a look at that when you get the slides. Next slide. So we're going to look into our mission, vision, and values from PACES Connection. And we worked really hard as a staff coming up with these. Next slide. Our work is to build a just society. I'll talk about that just a little bit more, but we really envision a world where all people thrive, that there's nothing to hold somebody back from being able to thrive. Next slide. And our mission is to be the human and digital catalyst that grows and supports this worldwide PACES and resilience movement and tells its authentic stories. And I hope to, I'm gonna put Kelly's name in for a PACES champion and tell her story. And there may be someone in your community who would write a story about you, or maybe you'll write your story and post it on your Guilford County Resilient Guilford PACES Connection webpage. Next slide. And our values. So we repeat our values at our weekly staff meetings for PACES Connection. We've got people scattered all over the country. Most people are in California. But by getting together each week and before we do any other work, we check in with each other. We have a moment of connection and collection. And then we go through our mission, vision, and value statements. And if you'll go to the next slide. Our values as individuals and as an organization, it is our intention and daily practice to encourage and model these core values: integrity and transparency, equity and inclusion, empathy and compassion, joy and celebration, and courage. And there's something about us reading these out loud with each other. I mean, we take turns reading that just, I don't know, it helps me get it at the cellular level. And next slide, because we also have what we think are the definitions of these, that integrity and transparency, we manage through trust and not control. We create trust in an accountable environment where everyone feels they can say what needs to be said when it needs to be said, and maintain an environment free from hidden agendas or conditions, accompanied by full information and no fear of retaliation. We speak directly, do what we say we'll do, and have pure motives. We contribute authentically and participate fully. We are leaders, and we model leadership at every level. Equity and inclusion, regularly examining our roles and perpetuating inequitable systems. How are we keeping that up? And work to change inequitable practices, structures, and policies that contribute to ACEs. And maintain an environment where everyone is welcomed, respected, supported, and valued. Empathy and compassion. We value empathy, which validates the experiences of others and is born from compassion. Joy and celebration. This is critical. We cultivate resilience and equanimity by sharing the truth of our stories and celebrating our lessons learned and our successes. And then courage. And this is so vital as we do this work and step out and share stories and ask people to do things that sometimes we're afraid to ask people to do, but knowing that we ourselves are the foundation of our success and the key to achieving our vision. We encourage and provide opportunities for personal and professional advancement and satisfaction. Our courage is grounded in the body and is a measure of our heartfelt participation in life with one another and with our work. And as I say, having these touchstones every week to go back to is just incredibly nurturing and gives us fuel to do the work. Next slide. Because we also have an equity and inclusion statement. And I'm sorry, I thought I'd fixed that, but we are an anti-racist organization committed to the full pursuit of social justice. There are good values words in here. In our work to promote resilience and prevent and mitigate ACEs, we intentionally embrace and uplift people who have historically not had a seat at the table. PACES Connection will celebrate the voices and tell the stories of people who have been barred from decision-making and who have shouldered the burden of systemic and economic oppression as a result of genocide, enslavement, we need to change that word, family separation, forced relocation, mass incarceration, redlining, and all other practices, policies, and institutions that have traumatized marginalized groups. These groups include people of color, people living with mental health and substance abuse challenges, people living with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQI community. So this is very important. We've all got to look at the systems that perpetuate the trauma, because our big job is first do no harm, not traumatize already traumatized people. How do we keep doing these things in schools and in the justice system, in banking, in business, in medicine, in mental health care? Having a foundation in 12-step work has been incredibly invaluable to me, because I know, and it sounds kind of cold in a way to say, if I'm not the problem, there is no solution. But if I'm not looking at my part of the problem, I'm not doing the active work to find the solution. So that's a value of mine, is introspection and looking at my part. Next slide. So a focus on values, and let's go to the next slide. And what we'll do is we'll look at what some other communities are doing. And these are not necessarily Southeastern communities. These are communities across the country. But Walla Walla, Washington was one of our first resilient communities. And they created Walla Walla, Washington, and Tarpon Springs, Florida, memoranda of understanding. And y'all will do this, and your values will be reflected in this. And what happens is, and you can read this, there's the link to it on the page, but you can read this, and as y'all grow as a community, most communities will create this letter of commitment or memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding, or New Hanover calls it a belief statement, and your members will sign it for their organizations. And this takes the values deeper into every organization in your community, which is really powerful. Next slide. This is the Tarpon Springs one. And so you can just click on this, but we want people to look at their own trauma, to look at how trauma is affecting the community, look at making the commitment to be at our meetings, to be a part of a committee, however it is that y'all decide to do committees, whether there's like an arts committee, justice committee, education committee. Different communities have different committee structures, but that's one of the requests made in the memoranda of understanding that truly are there to reflect the values and let people make an outward and visible sign by signing these value statements and taking them into their businesses. Next slide, please. Resilient Brunswick County, this is their membership agreement. You can go to their website and take a look at it. Next slide. And Pender County also has their memoranda of understanding on their website. So you can click on that and see how they list theirs. And again, the values are reflected in this memoranda of understanding that goes deep into the community. Next slide. And then a good starting point for values. The race and equity work group at Paces Connection, we worked for like 6 months to create this one infographic that puts some of our values forward and gives us a picture of what a path to a just society, a self-actualized, equitable, beloved society in which all thrive, belong, and feel loved. Wouldn't that just be amazing to create a world like that? But take a look at this. It got boiled down from thousands of other words, but you can put your Guilford, Resilient Guilford logo on that and share that if you wish. And this is a tool that we share. We have other tools, but as y'all do this work, it might be really good if you're in agreement with it to take it to heart. And I think that's about it. I hope I did okay on timing. And I'm here to answer some questions if you would like for me to. And see, there's my Tarpon Springs logo on my, this thing has many air travel miles on it. This mug has been across the country many times, but I take Tarpon Springs with me everywhere I go because I like to remember them and their work, because they really were the first trauma-informed community in the United States. If y'all ever get a chance to hear more about Tarpon Springs, it's pretty remarkable story. So may I answer any questions? Are we doing okay on time?
Yep, we are okay on time. Does anybody have any questions that you would like Carrie to address at this time?
It's a real soul search to look at this. And some communities will do this work using an app where I forget what the name of the app is, but you can put the words that are most important to you on a board, you know, on your computers as you're doing the work, and then let people vote. And that's a great way to do that. But a lot of it's going to come out of that statement where you had the 4 opportunity statements. A lot will probably come out of that.
Yep, I think so too. And we're going to transition right into that if nobody has additional questions. I love the connections that you made. I love the values and the value descriptions that went with the values, so that you really were very concrete with what you meant by what does it mean to have these different values and how does that show up. The ideas about making sure we also have an equity and inclusion statement, and also the MOU commitment letters. And it's good to see that we don't completely have to reinvent the wheel, that there are samples that are out there that we could look at and tweak for our own community that feels right for how Guilford County is addressing community resilience.
And that's what we said. Yeah, please use these as starting points, because that's what we want, is to help communities get a firm footing and leverage all the best practices that have been done elsewhere, but only your community is your community. So anyway, thank you so much for letting me be with you today. I'm going to stick around.
Absolutely. And Carrie, it looks like we have one question in the chat box. The graphic you shared is super powerful. Did you get any pushback on it?
And so which graphic was that? The one, I'm trying to get to the chat. The one, the path to a just society.
Yeah.
We asked for a lot of input on that. And so what pushback we got, we took into consideration, but we meant straight up for it to be bold, for it to be disruptive and disturbing in a way that that lets people see how you get to this, not to be chaotic, but just to have people think about things differently and try to figure out where they are on that path, and to give people the language. I mean, one thing that we so need in this movement is the shared language. And so we're hoping that that helps us share the language. But we listened to a lot of different input on this, and golly, we were so grateful for it. And it's still in development. I mean, if on the link that is on that slide, if y'all have any input, please share it on PACES Connection, because we're doing our historical trauma in the United States series, and we introduced that at our most recent iteration webinar on that, and we'll share this infographic and a couple of others when we get to the end of the series, and I think the series ends in May. The next one is historic trauma in the Northeast, and I'll find that link and put it in the chat so y'all can attend. Great question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that that really strong overview and kind of launching us right into this next piece of breakout rooms. And we're having some Zoom issues today, so we're hoping the breakout rooms go easy breezy. Leland will be sending the participants into breakout rooms here, but we'll probably spend 10 to 15 minutes really just talking through what are some key values that you think Guilford County should have to drive this work. With Carrie's really strong background on the importance of values and thinking about how we use those values to drive how we do our work. So if you can, when you get into your breakout room, if you can select a note taker, somebody that can kind of report out a recap of your discussion. When we come back all together as a team, we'll do some report outs and begin making a list of the kinds of values that you all come up with and the things that are important for us to think about as we do this work. So Leland, if you can send us into breakout rooms, that would be great. You'll have a facilitator in each of your rooms. All right. Have fun. Welcome back, everyone. We're getting everybody loaded back in. Some of our rooms are still coming on back. All right. I think everyone is back now. Oops. I'm getting cursor happy here. Okay. I think everyone is back now from your breakout sessions. Thank you so much for some really good discussion. Mary is going to guide us through just kind of a report out, and we have an ideas board. So as things are being reported out, we'll make notes of those so that we can kind of continue to gather all the good ideas that were generated in your breakout rooms. So.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly, and excited to see all of the collective work here. So let's start backwards. We had 4 groups, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's start with group 4 if you're willing to go. Do we have someone who can report out?
Hello, it's Carrie Cole from Old Vineyard. We had a lot of really good discussions. Lisa Taylor went ahead and read all 4 of the options, and we discussed them as the 4 options were presented. A couple of the key indicators or key conversations were the communication is the key. Everyone must be on the same page, and we must continue to update facts. There was reporting, reflecting on definitions, sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. Isn't that awful? It must be a dynamic process. It must be a dynamic process. Collaboration, must have collaboration and value. Vulnerability, honesty, and transparency need to be included, as well as accountability. There's a lot of words ending in Y, accountability. Finish what you start. Follow through is important, making sure that there's follow through after ideas are started. Must include adaptability, the process, and that's why a lot of us love number 4 in the foursome. Adaptability and loved a systems perspective, very systems perspective. Again, accountability was named a lot. I can understand that. It's one of my favorite words and one of my favorite things. And making sure that it works on a systemic issues, accountability as it works on systemic issues. Those were, I think that was a lot of what was discussed. And if there's anybody in 4 that I missed and that wants to share that I missed anything, please feel free.
Fantastic work. Let's give it up for group number 4.
Yay. And I put a link in the chat box. I think this is my first time using idea boards, y'all, but I think you can add things. So feel free to add or +1 things as we go, because I don't want to unintentionally miss any of the good brainstorming that has happened. So.
Excellent. And that's a great point about the +1. I heard a couple things that were reflected in our group, reflected by Carrie. And so if group members can just put +1s next to ones where that was the case, that'd be fantastic. All right, is group 3 ready to roll?
Sure. I'm having a little bit of a lag. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So group 3 had great discussion, and the discussion centered around some core values that we feel like would be very important in this work, of course. The first one was a community awareness and understanding of trauma and its impact. Then we had a lot of discussion regarding engagement and what that means and who that includes. And so we would love to see lifting up community voices, those with lived experiences, and making sure that we as providers get out of the way and allow them to help drive some of the decision-making processes and to check our own biases and privileges, and to really allow those that have experience in this world as well and have the lived experience of experiencing trauma, be able to drive the process rather than us telling them what needs to happen. There was also discussion around action. And so we do a lot of talking, but what are we going to do next? And so making sure that we're thinking about what the action steps would be. Equity and inclusion. So having a diverse membership, again, going back to including those community members with lived experience, and making sure that we have diverse representation that truly does represent our community as a whole. And then, of course, the focus on collaboration and including evidence in evidence-based practices or evidence-based models that we know have been effective for doing this work. So group 3, if I missed anything, please let me know. But thanks for the discussion.
Okay, 3 cheers for group 3. And remember, you can +1 in the idea board, and we'll keep going. How about group 2? Do we have a reporter?
That would be me. And I really hope I'm group 2 because I cannot remember what number I really was, but I think it was 2. So with that said, we did have a few members that had to hop off for other meetings. So if I miss anything, feel free to add at the end. Love what everybody has commented and added to so far. And we are also going to add family system, and somehow including the family system. We know that families are a root of our community. So what does it truly look like to support the family as a whole? And along with that, respect. So respecting community, respecting family voice, meeting families and communities and people where they are, and letting everyone have a voice. Collaboration, that seems to be a really popular one. Mary, am I going too fast? So collaborations not only with individuals, but agencies, what are the needs and wants, uplifting the positives and the celebrating. I love how Carrie included joy and celebration in her value statement and what she had mentioned. I think that's super important to focus on the positives. Patience and consistency. This is definitely moving towards change. It's going to take time. And with that consistency, that's when the change is really going to happen and when we're going to see it. Equity and inclusion was another. And along with that, anti-racism. And not only equitable access to care, but different types of programs that are available. And also the number of resources to meet the needs of our communities, our community members and communities, meeting those families and community members where they are to move towards a resilient community. Like I just said, community a lot. Does anyone else have anything to add from group number 2? We had some really good discussion. We spoke a little bit about the definitions as well. So I think that's all that we have to add. Thank you guys so much.
Way to go, group number 2. Thank you so much. And I see several people clapping. This is going to be our community habit as we celebrate, right? We clap for each other, we cheer, we get really excited. So be aware of that because it's my turn to report out on behalf of group 1. So if you want to cheer ahead of time, you can go ahead and do that. So put your hand up if you were in group 1. A lot of energy, great folks who were doing this work. And I just saw Lisa put in the chat, grace and mercy as people heal. And we talked about that a little bit in our group. There are so many things that you all brought up that our group reflected already. So things like accountability and being reliable. One of the key things is really being focused on building relationships. And we talked about authentic relationships, as well as being so critical to this work. And there were elements of vulnerability in that, which I think is listed up here already, and integrity and being able to act ourselves with integrity and then demand it of others with whom we work as well. We talked about kind of a foundational effect here and knowing where it is that we sit in our communities and what's needed based on where it is that we sit, and bringing together lots of different people so that we're filling out the big picture. We talked about, there was a great quote around how we do the work is the work that we do, and being able to move at the speed of trust. So building trusting relationships is critical in this work as well. Empathy and empathetical reflection is something that's going to be really important at the individual, family, organizational, and community level. And one of our team members also lifted up, and this, I think this was said before, but just want to reflect this too. The client is in control, right? So how do we, trying to think of some of the words, it's not autonomy. What is, help me out. What word am I struggling with and thinking about? Group one or anybody else? Mind readers, we are not. So I will work on the words that, but really about, client having autonomy, and we're there to serve and to be kind of a servant leadership role. And agency, thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Carrie, and many others. That is it, unless anybody else from group one. Did I miss anything? Okay, all right. We are at the end of this meeting time. Kelly, did you want to close us out? This was fantastic, and thank you so much to everybody for all the great work you did in small groups. Kelly, you want to take it from here?
Yep, I do. I'm going to stop screen sharing and just say thank you so much. We'll compile all of this information. And if, as we kind of come out the door, if I could give you one last ask. The poll that we were trying to work on, for whatever reason, poll is acting very wonky in our Zoom today, but I was able to pop it into a quick one question click survey. So I'm putting that into the chat box now. As you're kind of checking out for the day, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that and then just kind of selecting or voting, so to speak, for your particular preference of definition, we'll compile this information, continue to gather data, synthesize the value statements that were shared today, and report all of this back to our group as we think about our next listening session, and continue just to gather information from the whole team. So the link is in the chat box now. Thank you so much for everyone that participated and just shared lots of really good information about the process. And we'll follow up with notes and a copy of the recording and a summary of today's session as well. So the next meeting is November, stop screen sharing so I don't have it in front of me, November 3rd, first Wednesday at 12 o'clock. And we'll continue to process this and start talking about what action teams we need to make it happen. Thank you so much for participating, and to everyone that joined the call today. We will be back in touch soon. And if you have additional ideas, we want to hear them. Please feel free to reach out, and we will see you soon. Great job, everyone.